Freya, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Robin, for having me on FaceCulture. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for taking the time. So before we jump into your new album, Blood Orange, I'd like to jump back to the beginning. Now, I believe you were playing open mics since you were 12, and
Yeah.
I heard you say about this period, it really started making a difference once you started writing your own songs. What compelled you to kind of write your own thoughts onto
It's
paper?
it's so interesting because for me growing up, my dad, he's an actor and a voiceover artist, but his true passion in life is music 100%. And we have like guitars, acoustic guitars all over the house. Like every room, there's like at least three or four. It's an addiction at this point. But I just watched how much he would sit around the kitchen table with his acoustic guitar and he'd write and he'd play and he'd sing, you know. And I think growing up, I just watched that and I thought that's what you did. I kind of didn't know that wasn't normal, you know? And I didn't really, I was never really like peer orientated or at school, I was quite sort of like ostracized and bullied. So I kind of
Mm,
imprinted more on the adults in my life and like watching my mom and my mum plays like Celtic harp and the piano
okay,
really beautifully, and so did my grandma. So for me, it was kind of I just thought you had to choose your instrument. But I look back and I'm like, no, I was definitely like I was drawn to it, and I used to like when I was little, I used to try and like play individual notes, and my mum would sit with me on her lap and help me learn. So for me, music was a huge part of our family. And I just felt like I was quite late to the game by picking up a guitar at 9. And
mm,
I started piano lessons at 7, but I quickly found that once you get up to grade level, you have to be able to read music. And because
mm,
I'm very, very dyslexic, I really, really struggled to read the music and I couldn't like the lines, I couldn't tell the difference between the
right,
notes. And the same with reading and writing. Like if it's a story that I can tell like verbally or like sing, I love that. If I have to write it down, like school is really, really tough because I think, that's kind of the benchmark of what you're supposed to do, and I couldn't do it. So but music kind of was my escape after that, and that's kind of where I started writing songs because it was like I would turn to the piano or the guitar, instead of a friend. And that's kind of just what happened. But yeah, I started playing open mic nights. I think my first one was when I was 11, and then
okay,
after that, I literally got struck by a lightning bolt to the chest, and I was like, that's the first time I felt like I was my like true authentic self outside
okay.
of the house. I was very, very shy. And then after that, I was like, I was so addicted. And my dad would carry my keyboard or my guitar around to North London open mic nights, and it just never stopped. No,
And you mentioned feeling ostracized at school, and I don't want to bring up old wounds or anything, but
it's all good.
what did you were those the things that you then wrote about those early attempts at songwriting?
Yeah, one of the first songs I ever wrote when I was like 9 was about these two girls who were being really mean to me. And I
Okay,
was like, I'm not nothing. I'm a person too with love and a heart and feelings too. Bless, I was like 9 years old and I heard the voice memos. I'm like, oh my God, bless me. What the hell? I sound so little. I was like, what is going on? But I really like I don't know why, but I kind of turned to like the blues. Like
mm,
I was a 9 year old, redheaded ginger girl, and that's what I turned to was the blues. And I think ironically, a lot of people, it's like you do turn to it in those dark times. And I was just so grateful to have like a little life raft to hang on to. But yeah, that's kind of where it began. And then the next song was about a boy that I fancied in my class when I was like 10 who didn't like love me back or whatever. And then it just began. I was like, oh, this is what I do
but
now.
am I right in saying that you mentioned the blues? But am I right in saying that you're also very much in love with kind of that 70s disco era
I
type of
love
music?
it.
Oh,
All of the 70s. I just feel like there was something going on in that decade, almost
mm,
like the late 60s into the whole of the 70s. For me, that's like there isn't a song that I can listen to from that decade that I don't love. I think the way they recorded the music, the kind of the fact it was on, tape, and the fact that they were real instruments and real people, real voices, and the imperfections. I think we've got so used to hearing like perfection
sure.
in vocals that you kind of almost miss out on some of the grit and the heart and the kind of emotional connection. So for me, over lockdown, that was all I listened to, and it was hugely
Okay.
inspired by the next album, Blood Orange, which I wanted to have that kind of in a modern pop way, but I wanted it to have a sort of a feel of that.
Okay, before we could continue on this, a little bit more background, because what I find interesting is then a lot of people can have the idea, well, I would like to be a singer or I would like to sing and write songs, but then you have to do it. You have to first hear your own voice and think, okay, this is actually a voice that can do what I want to do. So when was that kind of transformation from just having fun with it too. I can actually do this, and this isn't just fucking around. Excuse my language.
I think it was when I was like 8 years old and I watched Love Actually for the first time. And I've been playing piano for about a year, but like really, really badly, just learning like basic stuff. And I watched Love Actually, you know, the scene with the little girl who sings All I Want for Christmas Is You at the end. I was like, whoa, she's so cool. And she looks like a sort of like 10-year-old, you know, and I was 8 and I was like, oh, I want to be like her. And I went to my bedroom. I was like, I'm just going to see if I can like sing that song. And I was like, I don't wanna love. And like, I did like this voice memo on one of my dad's recording little devices things. And I called like my best friend from primary school at the time, who eventually moved away. And that was another reason why I was super lonely after that. But basically I called her and I was like, I think I can sing. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah, I think I can sing. And then I sang it to her on the phone. She was like, oh, yeah, it's not bad. And then, I don't know, I just kind of like, I kept it secret, but I was like, always like, I wanted to sing. And I think it was when I went to my next school, because I was being so badly bullied at the first one. I think I sang on the playground and this girl was like, I can sing, and like got everyone around. And I had to sing in front of them. And it was like the first time that they'd actually treated me like a human being. And I was like, fuck, this is so cool. I was like, oh my God, people actually like me. I was like, it was addictive, I won't lie. But then it was also like, there was like this one musical night a year called The Celebration. And it was a night where people could play music. And it was almost like I was kind of in my little shelf the whole year. You know, I didn't really sit with people at lunch because no one wanted to sit with me. So I just go to the piano room and just play my heart out every year. I'd come back with new songs and like try again. And it was the one night where everyone was like, wow. So for me, I was like, it was just the first time I got treated with respect outside of the house and in that environment, and I was just completely addicted to it. Because at home I was shown so much respect that I was like, it was strange to me to be bullied when I left the house. I was like, this is just weird. So I think I was kind of coming back into my true self.
Oh, but that's very interesting to because I can imagine, yeah, that'd be very addictive because finally you can kind of show who you are. So
Yeah.
and that development, because and I've read a bunch of interviews that you talked about your first foray into the music industry, and it's not a fun industry in a way. It can be quite yeah, let's just leave it at that. It's a very volatile business. So when you kind of you have this dream and you enter the music business, and then all kinds of strange things happen. I read one story where, and I think this is very cool that you did this at such a young age, but you kind of went, well, they're not respecting me and I want to show myself, so screw them, I'm going home. That kind of mentality. Where did that come from? And I think that's very, very interesting to do at such a young age when you think everything is happening, but you stood firm. So where did that come from?
I think it was from my mum. My mum raised me really like, she gave me so much respect from a young age. You know, she let me dress myself from when I was like 2.5.
Okay.
And I one whole summer I wore welly boots the wrong way around, but I was determined to do it. And older grandmas would be like, what are you doing with her? And she's like, she's her own person. And I think I really appreciate that. And, you know, I didn't have to kiss or hug people that I didn't want to kiss or hug. She was like, this is her decision. It's like, I'm not going to make you do that for it. And I always remember being like, thank you. Like, and for me, it's those little acts of respect that kind of build up into that internal, like, self-esteem that you get. And for me, I was shocked that the first session that I ever did, like in the music industry with a proper producer, went so like, you know, that he was so kind of verbally abusive. But I was like, I've never experienced that again. And so it's really, really strange to me that I feel for people when it's like, when you're breaking into the music industry and you haven't got any success behind you yet, people can be a bit more like volatile, but your internal measurement, like I had people tell me like, you know, my songs were like too sad and like boring and I needed to write happy songs. I should like not have my second name. And I was like, my mum was like, as a woman, you're taught to shrink. And I'm like tall naturally. And she's like, just take up as much room as you need to take up in this world, because no one's going to give that to you, you know? You don't need to dye your hair. You don't need to change your name. You just need to really focus on, you know, the songs and the stories that you're telling, because they're true. And that's what matters. And you kind of have to just hold on. And it's so tempting to be like, to chase those trends. But I promise you, when I wrote Lost Without You, I mean, when I wrote it, Love Island didn't even exist. Like, you know what I mean? There's so many, and ballads were not cool at that point. They were not cool. Like, no one wanted to sign me, no one. In fact, someone almost did and then didn't, and I was heartbroken. So when, you know, I got signed by an indie label, I was so grateful to them for giving me a chance and giving me a chance to like actually be myself. But I held on because I knew the majors weren't going to give me that opportunity. I knew that. So I took a very small record deal, and I remember my lawyer being like, I can get you a much better deal. And I was like, I don't want more money. I don't. I want people who believe in me and who are going to let me be myself and be my most authentic self, because I think that's the best shot I've got, basically. Yeah.
You mentioned you kept holding on. Well, what keeps you going in those tough moments? Is it just the love for making music? Is it just certain you want to prove something to the world? What is it?
It's so interesting you say that, because I actually don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I've always been like weirdly determined,
Okay.
especially when people like don't think I can do something. That's my most like, it's almost like a magic trick. You know, you go, one of my favorite quotes, we actually have a Batman mask in our front room. And it's like, my favorite quotes is what Batman said. It's what you do in the darkness that puts you in the light. And when I heard that quote, I was like, I'm going to do this. I was like, no one is putting their money on me, no one, but I am. And I'm going to really, you know, my parents, they championed me. And I think I had a lot of like emotional support. And I think it takes a huge amount of emotional support to be an artist. You feel so vulnerable all the time. And to be fair, like if I'd have had like even one or two really bad experiences, I might not have done it. But every time I played, you know, the whole pub would like turn and be like, yeah, keep going. And I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, you need that support when you're starting out, because you don't have the internal, you just don't know which way you're going. But I'm really happy that I had parents that championed my songwriting from a young age, because that's the only power you have in this industry. The only power.
It's great to hear that your parents were so supportive and that they gave you some wisdom along the way. I think that's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
Once that first album is released and the success starts pouring in, do things change, or is it still, do you still see yourself as that person kind of in the dark writing alone?
100%. I feel like I don't really feel like, yes, success is amazing, I'm not gonna lie. When you've had so many years in the wilderness and in the darkness, it's just so good to be able to be like, you know, you can just be like, oh, my mum calls them bars you can't fall below. And you're like, sometimes that is gorgeous. And like, you're not resting on that. But especially after like, you know, 5 years of playing Lost Without You around open mic nights and people being just like, cool. It's like to actually have it, you know, been in the top 10. I'm like, yeah, I like to have discs. I'm just like, what? Like when I was growing up, I did an art project at school and they asked you to make anything you wanted. And I got some of my parents like little vinyls. They'll probably hate me for this, but I glued them, like 3 of them, to a board, and I painted like colors around the board and I put it on my wall. And I kind of guess I like manifested it, because it's like that time there was no way that was going to be a possibility. You know, I didn't actually come from people who were in the music industry, and it did felt like there was a big iron gate, you know, and it felt impossible to get through. It really did. And it was actually, you know, because someone has to put their neck on the line to get you in. And it's like, not many people want to do that. And I was really lucky that someone I went to school with was interning at the indie label that I signed to. And he was basically like, in a meeting one day, they were like, we don't have any ideas. Do you know anyone? And he's like, yeah, I know this girl from my school, and I think she's got a good voice and good songs. And I was like, he did that for me. So I think, you know, I said thank you to him in my album notes. And I think I'm very aware that it takes a village, and it looks like it's just me, but it takes a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I read this where you said you started to realize how much of a team effort it is, and obviously it's your name on top, but it's very much a team effort, and even from the support of your parents and that kind of support system that you have, I think that's it's very important.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because at Brit School, I think it's a really amazing school, but in the year that I had, it was such a weird mentality. Everyone just thought they could do it on their own. And I was like, even like when we do a show, you know, the backstage crew, the people who are doing the lighting, the people who are doing the sound, you're like, you would just be like yelling in a dark box without these people. And I'm like, and they showed no respect to them. And I was like, this is just weird to me. I think growing up, you know, my dad, like on the set of films, was always like best friends with the makeup ladies, like best friends with everyone, because he understood that even though it's your face that gets shown, it's like 100, 200, 1,000 people's work over the years who've helped you get there. And I think even as a solo artist, like I'm not like a band, I like that camaraderie, and I like to remember that I worked really hard, but so did a lot of other people to champion me. And so you always have to take that as just the truth. And I think people don't see that from the outside. So I think it's important to just remind up and coming artists to take that collaboration and wisdom very seriously, because it's important.
Yeah, and I think especially during the lockdowns, it became evident how important all those sections of the music industry are, from people, as you say, doing the lighting, doing the sound, just venues, and everybody who's contributing to the fact that we can listen and go to live concerts. And I think it's very important.
Yeah. And the songs allow you to do that. Like my dad was always like, he's like, you know, like one ballad can change your life. And I was like, I will see about that. But then, you know, I went through my first heartbreak, and I wrote Lost Without You, and it was just like, there was a change. I was like, that song is different from all the songs I've written before. I don't know where it came from, but it was kind of from a different place. I didn't think about it. It just kind of came out fully formed, and that never happens. So I'm still very, very lucky for that. And it's like, it's something I've really wanted to dive back into writing this next album. Was like, a lot of pressure kind of got put on it after it was successful to do it again. And I think it's when you sort of aren't trying that the best things happen. So you have to kind of get back to that mind headspace. And lockdown really helped do that, because suddenly I had no choice but to just be back at my parents and just writing back at the piano again. So it was kind of really, it was good. It was like back to full circle.
But I find this is I don't know the exact timeline, but I think you went on tour in Australia, and then that was kind of ended, and then the whole pandemic thing happened.
Yeah. We were about to go to LA to start working on the next album.
Okay.
And I was so nervous. I didn't want to do it. I was exhausted. I was so tired. And I just remember being like, I heard we were going home, and I was like, I'm so relieved. Like, obviously, I hope everyone's going to be healthy and well, and this is really scary. But I was like, please, God, get me home. I was so tired. And I really appreciated that time. I was like, I was back with my family, back around the piano, and, you know, we were kind of back in that, like, there's no one but us kind of no pressure mentality, you know? And I was putting a lot of pressure on myself for the second album. And over the lockdown, I just kind of took it off. I was like, you know, I gripped so hard to get the first album to be something. And this one, I was like, I just want this one to be a joy. Like, I don't want to find it as painful to record it. Writing it's always, you know, a joy, but recording I found really scary. And this album, I actually put a lot more joy into it, which was fun.
Yeah, and this maybe goes back to kind of that 70s influence. But what I was wondering about, because I don't know the timeline, in part this album is about a breakup, and was that before you kind of went back home and started writing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've been broken up for about, I think, like 3 months or 2 or 3 months at that point. And for me, I was just kind of running on adrenaline, like hiding from it. And it was just so easy to hide from it because so much was going on.
Sure.
But I was still feeling it in the quiet moments, you know? And then I think in Australia, I was feeling really sort of run down, and I was like, I actually am starting to feel it a little bit. And then it was something that we came home, and suddenly there was just silence. And you're like, oh my God, there is nowhere to hide. But there's also nowhere to hide from like the fact that I was like, I really, really love this person. You know what I mean? Like for me, I was like, holy crap. Like before I was trying to convince myself, I was like, I'm so busy. Like, you know, like I can do anything. And it's like, no, like the reason why I'm so passionate about music is because it's to tell people that I love things that I can't say to them. And then suddenly the music had gone above the people. And I was like, that's wrong. This is the wrong way around. Right. And the 2 years allowed me to like flip it back over and was like, no, the people that I love come first. And then the music that I write about them and the things that I struggle to say to them or even to myself, that's going to be my life's work, but it's not going to be the number one thing that I do anymore.
Right. And then this idea of writing down and singing about the things that you have trouble saying in real life, you have to be very, not only honest with other people, but honest with yourself. And that's not always the easiest thing to do. So what was that like for you? And as a songwriter, because you already showed signs of this when you were 9 years old and writing about those kind of things. So how do you see that development to being open and vulnerable?
That's such a good question. Because honestly, I feel like the first album was kind of a lot of me being like, why did this happen to me? And then this second album was like, it's happening again. Like, I think I'm going to start, you know, looking as like inwards, more like, am I the common denominator in this level of like repeated loneliness and repeated heartbreak? I'm like, I think I'm having something to do with it. Before I was just like, why? And now I'm just like, no, it's definitely me. I should definitely work on this. You know, and the kind of like, that's why it's called Blood Orange, because it's kind of like the inner growth that you do during your like, you know, early to mid to late 20s. It's like you grow huge, these leaps forward, you know?
Sure.
You know, from like 18 to 28 is like I am a completely different person,
Sure.
but also the exact same. So it's really strange to kind of, well, it's beautiful to have like a little time capsule of watching that. Because when I started this album, I didn't think I could come back to music. I was too scared. I really was. And this album helped me overcome so many things. Like brick by brick, it helped me kind of rebuild myself, song by song. And then eventually I just started really enjoying it. I was like determined to overcome my biggest fear, which was kind of the, like we were talking about earlier with the singing in the playground. It was kind of people pleasing. And it's like I was trying to impress people. And that's
Okay.
exhausting. You can't maintain that. And that's
Sure.
why I was so tired, you know? Even like behind the scenes with my team, I was trying too hard. And I wanted it to be more effortless and I wanted it to be more authentic. And even if it wasn't like as pretty or perfect, I wanted it to be like just more authentic and just kind of flow. But it takes a lot of courage to do that, because if someone rejects that, then they're really rejecting you. You know, if someone rejects a fake version of you, it doesn't hurt. But then you're not really connecting with people. So it's like, it's kind of a pro and con. And I've just, with this album, I've gone for I'm just going to say the things that really scare me again and again and again and again and see what kind of album I make. And I'm really proud of it, which is crazy. I never thought I'd do
that. Now that you're on the other side in a way, did you figure some things out about yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that I was being very, very harsh on myself. You know, whether that was in creating music in the studio or even like working out, I was being like so sort of like aggressive to myself and being like, come on, come on, come on. And it's like, that was not making me happy. And I think just as a general thing, it's like, you know, I've stopped doing really intense workouts and now I just do like lots of walking outside in like nature and like Pilates. And like I've lost like 3 stone. So like I was so desperate to do that before. And I was like, and it's the same with the music. I was so determined for it to be successful. I was like crying in sessions and like, you know, not being able to sleep because I was so determined. And now I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm in this place where just kind of whatever will be, but I'm just going to enjoy it. That's literally my only goal, is to like lower the stress in my life and just up the authenticity. And I think just put down the walls a little bit and just see what happens.
What gave rise to this transformation then? Because obviously something like that doesn't happen from one day to the next. And you kind of described this album as 18 months of some of the worst times of your life and then 18 months of some of the best times of your life.
Completely agreed. Yeah.
But again, that doesn't happen in a day. So how did that transformation go? And did writing this album play a big part in that?
I think, yeah, it did. Like, it could have been a very different album, especially if I hadn't got the time to stop. At the time, like, lockdown was really scary because suddenly there's a lot more pressure on your second album, but suddenly there was no help, you know, there was no feedback. And I basically just like, I turned to the fans and I was like, I'm going to be on Instagram doing a weekly live stream for an hour every Tuesday night. If you want to tune in and help me make this album, because I have all these songs and these feelings and I don't know which ones to choose or to go forward with. And I'm going to play, you know, old songs like Lost Without You and Castles, and we're just going to have a chat and a tea every week. And we did 14 weeks of that, and we called them the lockdown live streams. And I could not be more grateful to them for that, because I don't think they realize it's like my indie label basically ceased to exist. They went from having 40 people in the office to 4. So I didn't have an A&R for this album. No one helped me choose these songs. And that is terrifying, because every album that you know has fantastic people working in that department, and I didn't have anyone. So basically I had to turn to the fans, my family, you know, reconnecting with the person I love, like trying to rebuild those friendships from like the ground up. And I let them help me. And I never had done that before. I was determined to do it on my own and to be like, I can do this on my own, even though I was struggling. And this album was helped massively by the fact that I let them that feedback, and it was so crystal clear once, you know, the fans were like, we like this song, we like this song. I was like, oh, cool. And you know, like, people don't ask fans enough. They're so obsessed with like the music industry that you're like, you forget the point is to connect with your fans. But some people are like, I have to go through this to get to that. And it's like, no, you can just do that. And just, you know, I really miss seeing their faces. Like, these are people that I'd seen, like, you know, multiple times on tour, like every night sometimes. So it's like, to be able to connect with them. And they still send me messages now, being like, you got me through lockdown 1. And I'm like, you guys got me through lockdown 1 as well. Like, you gave me something to look forward to every week, something to put on like nice clothes for. I was like, oh, thank you, you know?
And I think this goes into, and I always like to ask this question, but it goes into how one defines success. Because if you phrase it by saying, okay, I need a certain amount of money in my bank and I want to play stadiums everywhere I go, that's obviously that can be a goal, and that's commendable. But
Yeah.
at the same time, there's nothing wrong with just living your life and not worrying about too much of the circus around it. And I mean, if you can make that connection with people, then for a lot of people, at least I hear that from a lot of musicians, that can be enough. So have you kind of I can imagine after the first album of success, like you say, you put a lot of pressure on yourself. But have you settled down now, and that part of letting go that you mentioned, how did you kind of achieve that? Was it just reading? Was it just growing older? I don't know.
Did a lot of Zoom therapy. I've done like 2 and a bit years.
Okay.
So that massively helped. And also, like, you know, moving out of my parents' place, like we bought our first place, and it's like, that's an honor. Like, I would never have had that opportunity without music. Like, I would never have been able to basically ever move out. So I think knowing that there's a world where this didn't happen just gives you great perspective. And I think having that time kind of away, kind of forcibly, like, I needed it, but now it's back, I'm so excited. I'm like, it's not a given you get to come back and do music, or a given you'll ever hear your songs on the radio again. It's just not. So when you do, it's kind of, it gives it a new perspective. And I think, I did a lot of work. I think I did a lot of work on myself. I'm not gonna lie. I did, like, you know, years of therapy, like I did like a lot of life coaching, which I really love, with my mum's friend, who really helped me like with visualization and like kind of overcoming the subconscious blocks that we all have to success that we don't know we have.
Right.
There's actually more fear of success than I think fear of failure at this point, because it's like how we see ourselves and like our identity, that would have to change to get to certain places. You know, if we see ourselves as a struggling artist, then doing something successful would be dangerous, you know? But if you can visualize standing on that stage, or like Glastonbury, or if you can visualize like your album going to #1, it's like, that's not scary anymore, because it's happened in your mind.
Sure.
And I think even this year, like, I've kind of gone back to that visualization that I haven't done for years. And I really, over Christmas, I was like, what would something I really want that I'd never asked for? And I was like, I really want to play Graham Norton, because I love his show so much. And I've always watched it since I was like 8. And I visualized like sitting on the sofa and like him like talking to me. And I was just like, I had the best time in my head, but I was like, that's obviously never going to happen. 2.5 months later, I am sat on that sofa. I'm like, mother of God. I'm like, this is not real. And also, there was no chance of me getting that. It was the final slot of the final season, and there were 15 people ahead who were booked to do that show, and he decided to champion me. Like as an independent artist, to get that is just like, just doesn't happen. So yeah, incredible.
So you're just enjoying the ride at this point. It's kind of okay.
Exactly. I think I've shifted my mindset to like other people's measurements of things to like my own internal measurements of things, and also like finding these moments of like micro joy, you know, in a day, and just accepting that they are as valid as the massive moments. And I think the little moments of joy and gratitude can ripple into just bigger things, because that's just the energy that you're kind of putting out into the world on a daily basis. I think I did, you know, have a couple of years where I was kind of like, I was so tired that I kind of lost that gratitude a bit, and I was like, I'm just kind of getting through it. And it's like, that's not the mindset to have, you know? If you need that time off, if you need that time to rest, I take resting a lot more seriously than I did, because it's not something that I did it was called a goddess course. It was amazing. And it was basically like about that kind of just being, and that being enough. Because I think our world has taught us that it's like, you have to do this thing to get this thing, to be this thing. And it's like, you don't. You can make your own rules, and you really can accept that if that makes you happy, whatever, however small, you know, and you're not hurting anyone, like, then that's valid.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I read a book. I think it was called something like Embracing the Ordinary or something. It was kind of this notion of, you don't have to be a superstar to be happy in this world. You can do anything in a way, and just based on, as you mentioned, your perspective on life, and that helps. That determines a great deal, I suppose.
Yeah.
There's one last thing I want to talk about, which is weekends, because I saw a live video. Can't remember where it was, Alexandria or something.
Oh yeah, Alexander Palace. Yeah.
Alexander, and then this is also said in the comments below, but your voice sounds just exactly like you do on the record. So how do you, I don't know how I should ask this question, but how do you perceive your own voice, and how do you work on it to have such control in those moments?
Well, this is a really good point, because I'd never had singing lessons until like sort of 4-5 years ago, and that's like my whole life I'd been singing, and I'd never had lessons. So for me, I was really struggling with the pressure that gets put on the vocal cords. They're just little chords, and it's like they have so much pressure on them, and also stress can affect your voice massively. And so I had a vocal teacher, and he was in LA, called Ron Anderson. He is the best, or was the best, like, because he very sadly passed away over lockdown. And I felt like really, really lost without him, genuinely, because I was doing I had an hour-long recording, but I just decided I was going to do it every day. I was going to train like an athlete, and I'm just going to see what could happen, because I think before I was kind of coasting on the fact that I could kind of learn a cover in a day and sing it, and everyone would say it was good. I was like, cool. But now I was like, I don't just want to be good. I want to be great. I want to see what it would feel like to feel like well-rested, well-trained, and like powerful and just ready, you know, when opportunities come in, because these incredible opportunities do come in. And there was one over the lockdown, and I said no to it because I was just feeling so physically not prepared. And I look back and I'm like, holy and that was a real catalyst moment for me, where I was like, I can't let this happen again. I have to train like an athlete, because I will regret it for the rest of my life. You know, these opportunities, they're not a forever thing. It's kind of like making hay while the sun shines. The sun is shining. It hasn't shone for a while, and I'm just going to make the most of it. But yeah, I got like a little folding treadmill for Christmas, and I've been doing my vocal training on it every single day. And I'm trying to practice standing up, which is one of my biggest fears, because I sit down or I hide behind the guitar. And so for me, like standing up and singing on Graham Norton, it was like, you know, I'm like on the treadmill at like 2 a.m, like in these like massive like boots, heels, trying to do my vocal training. And it's like, I love like working really hard in the darkness for those moments that hopefully make it look effortless. And also just treating it much more like a muscle, and much more like something you can work on than just like a talent, you know? I think it is something you can grow and work on. But I found his protege, Ron's protege, it's called Dr. Pipe, and we've just started doing lessons again online. I'm doing one tomorrow. I'm like 4 in, and already I feel insanely strong. Like this man, like Ron, he saved like Adele's voice, like after surgery, like Beyonce's voice when she was about to lose it, Alicia Keys, like every major singer you have ever heard of, he has saved their voice. So I'm incredibly grateful to him. And I think it's one of the reasons why I don't have any like nodules or anything, because I know people much younger than me who do. So it's important to like keep the stress in your life low, but keep the training, you know, consistent and high. And I have a diary that I write every night, and basically I have like my little stars. And if I do my vocal training that day, if I get out and do my 10,000 steps, if I play music, if I, you know, eat consciously and enjoy my food, like I get my stars. And then that's all I'm trying to do, is just that one page. And I think it builds into something bigger than that. It's a kind of atomic habits thing, I think.
No, that I think it's only common sense to approach what you do as an athletic endeavor, because it is very physical. You have to be able to control your body from the core and everything. So I think not a lot of musicians realize this, perhaps. Maybe once they go out on the road and they figure out, okay, I need to be fit to be able to do this. I have one of those Fitbits, so I try to do 10,000 steps as well.
Oh my God, amazing. Isn't it so fun? I feel so much better. That's the biggest shift I made over the last year, is going from doing like no steps and like just to getting outside every day for like at least a couple of hours. It's amazing. Especially if you're mental health, well, it's so good.
It focuses your mind, and you become a little bit competitive. If you didn't make it the last day, then the next day you want to go over and all that stuff.
I was doing promo in Dublin, and we got somewhere half an hour early. I was like, can I just like walk around Dublin for like half an hour? And they were like, okay. I was like, I need to get my steps.
I've literally done that at people's houses and stuff, where I just walked around the room.
Yeah, just be like,
I need to get those.
My dad actually walks up and down the corridor in their house. They have like a really long flat, and he walks up and down, and you just hear him like pacing. But he can sometimes get like 12,000 in a day just from listening to podcasts and going back and forward. It's amazing.
Perfect. Freya, may I thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Oh, thank you, Robin. This has been a real joy. I've loved talking to you.